Well, kia ora, good afternoon everyone. Over the weekend I had the great privilege of welcoming my good friend Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and his fiancée Jodie Hayden to Queenstown for the annual Australia-New Zealand Leaders Meeting. In a time of global volatility and economic uncertainty, our trade and economic links have never been more important. Both our economies are strongest when trade flows freely and we share a common commitment to resisting rising protectionism. And at home, we both face many of the same challenges: cost of living pressures, the need for fiscal discipline, and the drive to lift productivity. Our deep ties in trade and investment, innovation, people and tourism continue to deliver real benefits for both countries, boosting growth, creating jobs and supporting prosperity on both sides of the Tasman. Put simply, Australia is critical to New Zealand's economic success. Prime Minister Albanese and I are committed to making our economic relationship even stronger. We want to move closer to a single market that makes it easier for businesses to operate across both countries. For example, we have aligned our building standards, meaning whether it's laminated structural timber at a kitchen door handle, the benchmark is the same in Auckland as it is in Sydney. We've also harmonised our digital technology standards, so a company in Queenstown or Queensland follows the same rules for cloud storage or cyber security. This kind of harmonisation lifts productivity, it drives growth, and it helps our economies go faster. We also spent time discussing the increasingly complex global environment. New Zealand and Australia see the world in very similar ways. Our two countries are similar in that our economic prosperity is founded on security and stability, and we had a good discussion around our deepening alliance underpinned by the work of Richard Miles and Judith Collins, who have done a great job of strengthening closer defence relations. With increasing integration between our forces, we are deploying more together, we are training more together, and we are exercising more together. And with this government's significant lift in defence spending, I am determined that we are both interoperable with Australia and that we procure together to ensure that our purchases are as cost effective as possible. Just in summary, a really good visit and the relationship is in very good heart. And with that, happy to take your questions.
Are you going to reward Hamas by recognising Palestine?
Well, again, as you saw from the statement from the Foreign Minister this morning, our view very clearly is that we're going to weigh up our position over the next month. We acknowledge that some of our close partners have and others haven't taken a position to formally recognise Palestine. It's a formal decision that Cabinet will take in September, and frankly, it's something that the Minister of Foreign Affairs will articulate when he's at the Leaders' Week in the UN at the end of September.
Winston Peters says that there's strong views within the government over this issues. Who holds those strong views within Cabinet, and are you confident you'll be able to come to a unified position?
Oh, absolutely. But we have. I'm just acknowledging that this is an issue that has been. We've had a long-standing position, since partition in 1947 to recognise both Palestine and Israel, and clearly, our focus has been, as we've said, when, not if. And as a result, for us, we've got to work through this rather, serious issue. We've got to do it properly. It's a complex issue. There are strong feelings on all sides of this debate in the public, as you've seen, and it's important that we make the right decision.
Are you confident that all three parties within the coalition will come to a unified position on that?
You say yes.
Can you lay out for us the factors that you will need to consider before making a decision?
No, I'm not going to get ahead of the process. We're taking it very seriously. We appreciate that it's it's an important decision, and it's something that for us to work through in a very serious, proper way, and that's what we're going to do.
What message does it send that New Zealand is out of step with Canada, France, the United Kingdom, and now Australia?
Well, look, I've spoken to President Macron, I've spoken to Prime Minister Starmer, I've spoken to Prime Minister Albanese. We've talked about their respective country positions around that. We're going to form our own position. It's a complex issue. It'll take some time, but again, we've had our first conversation in Cabinet, as you've reported today, and we've got a process that we'll work through. I don't want to get ahead of that process.
Why now, though? Why now?
Sorry?
Why is it being considered now?
Well, as you've seen, a number of partners, some partners have moved their position from the historical one that we've been very aligned with as well. Others haven't, and as a result, it's important for us to, weigh up our position as a government, and that's the work that we'll do.
What are your concerns, Prime Minister? What are your main concerns with recognising a state of Palestine?
Well, it's just, it's important that it's a complex decision. There are a range of views on all sides of the debate. It's important that we make our own decision as New Zealand. We have an independent foreign policy. It's important that we weigh it up seriously. It's a complex issue, and I think we've got a good process to work our way through that decision.
Because
but I just say to you, what we're really fixated on is, we are seeing a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. We are seeing Hamas hold hostages that should be released. We're seeing no evidence of a ceasefire emerging at this point in time. There's good efforts going on from the US. There's good efforts going on from other Arab states as well. We want to encourage that, but the bottom line is that hasn't materialised. And so, what we really need to see is a stop to the suffering that's happening. But equally, as you saw with the statement that the Foreign Minister signed this week with a number of other countries over the weekend, what Israel's doing, we think is wrong. It sort of certainly aggravates the humanitarian situation, and their plans and proposals risk violating international law. And so, it's entirely appropriate that we take the time to actually make sure we weigh up our decision and work that through in a sensible way.
Does it worry you that the United States might look at that in a bad way?
No, we have an independent foreign policy, and we'll make our own decisions that are right for New Zealand and consistent with our values. The process, we've had I think a statement from the Minister today post a cabinet conversation. It was the first opportunity that we've had as a cabinet in person to come together to have an initial conversation about that, and obviously it's important that process runs through. But as I just say to you, is that since partition in 1947, we've strongly supported a separate Palestine, a separate Israel, living peacefully together. Obviously, different countries have made assessment shifts in recent weeks, as you've seen, and some of our friends have, and partners have, and some of our partners haven't.
Would we consider having an ambassador either based here in Wellington or doing a bit of timeshare?
Getting way too ahead of the process. As I said, we've got a lot to weigh up in our position over the next month. We'll go through that process in a very diligent
Why won't you lay out the
recognise
conditions for that recognition? Why don't New Zealanders get to know how the government's going to decide?
Well, the government's foreshadowing to you how we are going to go about that process.
So
what we're saying very clearly is that we'll make a formal decision in September. We want the cabinet will make a decision at that point, and the Minister, when he's at UN Leaders Week, will communicate our approach on that issue.
Criteria? Why don't we get to know what the criteria is?
Well, we will work that through as a government and as a cabinet.
Will you then share it once you've figured it out?
Absolutely, yes. Once we announce a decision.
Prime Minister, will you recognise a state of Palestine while Hamas still has hostages? MPs have suggested it's promoting terrorism. I mean, how are you expected to get agreement at the cabinet table when people are saying things this strong?
Well, you would have seen, well, absolutely, we're not going to recognise a state that has Hamas in it. There is no role for Hamas in any future Palestinian state. I think you've seen that from a number of the leaders that have changed their positions on recognition or accelerated their positions on recognition. So for us, that's an absolute non-starter. We're going through a process where we're going through cabinet will have make its own decision, as I said, in the month of September. That will then be communicated at the UN Leaders Forum that week. I imagine around that time New Zealand will know as well.
How does New Zealand recognise a country?
Sorry?
How does New Zealand recognise a state?
Well, it's a complex issue, and so as you well know, there's a range of thoughts around what actually constitutes statehood, and that's actually why it's a complex issue, because we want to be able to work through those issues and make sure we're making the right decision and our own position on it.
Prime Minister, why
need to release the hostages before we recognise Palestine?
Well, again, our view very clearly is Hamas started this, October 7th, with 1,200 Jewish folk, innocent civilians killed, hostages that have been held over a long period of time. They need to release the hostages. It's as simple as that. They're a terrorist organisation, and they need to release hostages immediately.
Do that before we recognise Palestine?
Well, there's no role for Hamas in any future Palestinian state, and I think you've heard Arab states articulate that very clearly. You've actually heard the Palestinian Authority articulate that very clearly. You saw us sign a letter in New York over a week ago, which was again saying, we want to see free and fair elections. There'd be a whole bunch of criteria that would be necessary around that. But I'm not going into that conversation because we need to work our own way through the process, and we'll make our own decision about it.
The Foreign Minister has outlined some of those criteria, even in his statement. He's spoken of in the past about what New Zealand would want to see in order to recognise. Some of those things aren't going to happen in the next month. You're not going to have elections in the next month. So are you in a bit of a bind here? How will you recognise if some of those things don't happen?
Well, as you can imagine, this is why I'm saying to you it's a very complex issue, because it's all very well recognising a state, but what comes next? that is the critical question. And so, those are the things that we need to think through and work our way through as we come to a very considered and deliberate decision about our position on it.
Could September be a conditional decision?
Again, I'm not going to presuppose the outcome and or get ahead of the process.
Did Albanese give you a heads up of their decision or their announcement over
Over the last week, I've spoken with President Macron, I've spoken with Prime Minister Starmer, I've spoken obviously with Anthony on this issue. We talked about it again while we were together over the weekend. You've heard his statement today where he said that yes, he and I spoke about it, and that is the case. And so, I understand the partners' positions for their countries. Obviously, there are variances between, Canada, UK, France as to how they've gone about doing it, which I think speaks to some of the complexity and the challenge, and actually, moving into forward with recognition. You've got, there's a different set of, everyone's coming at it with slightly different approaches. And that's why it is complex and difficult, and we have to work through our own view on that and then weigh up our own position around that. But we will make our own decision based off our own values.
How have you communicated this to Israel?
Sorry?
How have you communicated this to Israel?
Well, again, I'm not aware that we have communicated this to Israel. Right, we've had a cabinet conversation, which I'm just, you've seen a statement come out, and I'm answering the questions from that today. But sorry.
Are you expecting to speak to a representative of Israel soon to communicate?
Well, we may well, but I mean, we need to be able to work our way through the process, as you understand, which is that Cabinet will make a decision in the coming weeks that will be communicated when we get to the UN Leaders Week. We need to make a decision that's the one way up our position in New Zealand. It is complex, as I've said. There are debates of doing it, not doing it. There will be debates of people with strong views on either side of the debate. I get all of that. But it's entirely appropriate that we come to inform our own view after a very considered approach.
Who does New Zealand talk to on the Palestinian side about recognising a state?
Minister Peters has actually spoken to he's had a number of interactions actually with the Palestinian side, and over a number of years. The Palestinian Authority would be obvious people to talk to, and he has talked to in the past.
Can I just ask a question about another matter?
Sure.
Was Winston Peters' behaviour on Friday at the City Rail Link test train, refusing to put on the high-vis vest, was that appropriate?
I don't know. I didn't give it a second thought, frankly. I was more excited to see a train working on the CRL after all the investment that we've put into it, and more important about what that represents for Auckland in terms of that we could get on a test service and actually see it in operation. And I have to say, it's an incredible feat of engineering when you get into those tunnels. And I've travelled on undergrounds in New York and London, frequently and daily.
I mean, have you seen the footage?
No,
of him refusing to wear a jacket with the chief, to wear a jacket with the chief executive of the City Rail Link, with one of the strategic.
I haven't given it a second thought, frankly. I wasn't aware of it, and I was more engaged with a number of people that I was talking to while I was travelling on the train.
Is that appropriate, though, given your government is reforming workplace health and safety laws? Obviously, you've spoken in the past about our, high fatality rate in workplaces. You've got the Minister for Rail refusing to wear personal protective equipment.
Well, look, I mean, I think, I have to be honest, it was a bit unusual that we were in high-vis with hats and safety glasses on a train that's actually a very nicely worked train and underground. But, I didn't give it any thought. I whack the gear on, get on the train so I can see what the hell's going on, so we can actually make sure that this thing's going to get up and running as quickly as possible.
This week is Rail Safety Week. Does it trivialise Rail Safety Week? Him refusing to wear safety gear around a railway?
No.
What's National going to do to turn the polls around?
Well, I mean, again, I don't comment on polls, as you know. I don't think the New Zealand people want me talking about myself or polls. They want me focused on them. And, we're a government that is very focused on and very clear about what they want us to do. They want us to fix this economy. And we are doing everything we can to do exactly that. We have a very good long-term plan about putting the right things in place to make sure New Zealand's set up for a great future. And I honestly believe New Zealand has an outstanding future and incredible potential ahead of it. But, again, people get to make their decision, in 2026. And, I've had a very pragmatic view to this. As we got elected. We got elected to do a change and do a clean-up and to do a turnaround. These are the cards that we got dealt with in this economic part of the cycle, and given the damage that you've seen. and now we go forward from here. I just say, for us, it's all about the economy. It's all about the economy. That's what New Zealanders care about. That's what's their #1 priority, above and beyond anything else. That's what they're fixated on.
Just
so
on
are there
that,
any
Prime
things that you
Minister.
could do in the short term that could help with the economy?
Yeah, look, I think if you take a step back, what's gone on? Look, we've had the biggest recession we've had since for 35 years. We've had a huge COVID hangover, as you saw last week with the Treasury analysis. That yes, the actions of the previous government did contribute to the cost of living crisis that we're all experiencing. And then thirdly, if you think about it, at the back end of last year and into the first part of this year, first quarter, we had really quite good, strong economic growth. There's no doubt about it, since April, since the tariff announcements, what you're seeing is a real loss of confidence and sentiment around the world, but I'd say to you also here in New Zealand. So, the last 3 months have been pretty challenging because there's been, anxiety, understandably, with what's happening in the global environment. But you're seeing sort of a two-speed recovery at the moment. The first bit is if you're in the South Island, as I often have been. I came back over the weekend from Queenstown, which is absolutely pumping. You've got economic growth, you've got falling unemployment, as you would have seen on the unemployment numbers in the south. And if you're in primary industries, we're having outstanding record years. So that's all great on one level in our rural provincial parts of New Zealand. And then what you're seeing certainly in Auckland and Wellington here in our cities, it's much more challenging, it's much tougher times. And so what we're trying to do there is the particular emphasis is in the area of manufacturing. That's why we introduced the accelerated depreciation of investment boost. It's also in the area of construction and development, which is, it's got a lot of jobs associated with it, which you're seeing with us putting forward the $6 billion worth of infrastructure investment before Christmas, and you're seeing continued projects being added to that. And we're expecting future interest rate cuts as well to continue, and so so it is two-speed, and I acknowledge that, and that's why you're seeing us since April, move to make sure that we're actually moving in a very dynamic way to say, right, if there's things that we can do, we should be doing, let's do them. But let's do sensible things that are actually consistent with the long-term economic plan that we have, that I think is the right one and is a.
What New Zealanders have to, and you say for a long-term plan, what New Zealanders have to look forward to, how might things improve in, say, the next 6 months? Well,
look, I mean, you're seeing a huge number of New Zealanders roll over their mortgages to lower mortgage rates. $20 a fortnight. That is not immaterial. That is significant money in people's back. Pocket they can spend back in the economy. And so you're going to have a lot more New Zealanders, because they've been on short-term fixed rates rolling through. We think there'll be further interest rate cuts. We expect that there would be. And
so that's Reserve Bank. Yep.
That's the Reserve Bank, yes. What you're seeing is a huge amount of infrastructure projects that are now kicking off, and real shovels in the ground before Christmas, which is good. You're seeing the first effects of our fast-track legislation. Think through the decision that we saw last week or the week before last, where the ports of Auckland have got their $200 million extension for their 2 wharfs in place in Auckland. That came through in 6 months. Advice would be that it would normally take 5 years for something like that to happen. Those are the things that are coming. But I fully acknowledge, in our cities in particular, Auckland and Wellington, it's been tough, and it has been, as I said, a bit two-speed.
Prime Minister, just on the economy.
Sorry, yes, ma'am.
Go.
Thank you.
Just on the economy, Chloe Swarbrick from the Greens has suggested she's interested in holding a finance portfolio. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I won't be working with Chloe Swarbrick in any future government. My personal view is, frankly, Chris Hipkins, Labour, Greens to Party Māori are actually all variations on the same theme. What do they want? They want to spend more. Last time they increased spending by 84%. As you saw last week, it created the cost of living crisis. What do they want to do? They want to tax more. I think it's another $88 billion they plan to tax on capital gains tax, wealth tax, inheritance tax, trust tax, a whole bunch of things. And they also want to run up our debt even further, up another $44 billion. So, it's quite clear that it's going to, I think it's highly unlikely, but if they ever form a government, it's going to be very messy.
Prime Minister,
on the joint statement, what protection measures have you put in place to ensure that whenua Māori is protected under that joint statement, particularly around extraction and resources and minerals, and what are the protection measures for the domestic procurement?
You
for
mean the
mining?
joint statement that we raised
With
of Australia and New Zealand at the end
Because
of bilateral?
all the clauses that you had identified as a joint statement with the Australian have an impact on treaty settlements, or they go across treaty settlements pre and post settlement. So what are the mechanisms there to safeguard treaty settlements and Māori interests?
Yeah, so as you understand, this was a joint statement between the country of New Zealand and the country of Australia, and that statement is what that's about. Within New Zealand, we have our own legislation around RMA, around and our core legislation, and you've heard us say consistently, despite the changes we've got on resource management, we are protecting treaty settlements and Māori property rights.
Around the safeguards of treaty settlements and Māori interests in lands and resources, what protection measures will be in place?
The same that exists today.
Can you set out, just clarify for us, what exactly are the broad range of views that government members hold on recognising the state of Palestine, and roughly what the split is for and against that move?
No, I'm not going into that, because we want to have a quality conversation for the first time today. You've seen a statement from the Minister articulating the conversation, of where we are in the conversation, of where we are in the process going forward from here. But I just say to you, it's not abnormal. Every government around the world, when I've spoken to other leaders, have had a range of opinions amongst their own cabinets or amongst their own governments. And that's what we need to navigate. There are very strongly held views on all sides and legitimate views on all sides. And so it's important that we go through a process. As I said, I'm not going to get ahead of that, and we'll work our way through it.
Prime Minister,
what would recognising Palestine actually mean for Palestinians themselves?
Well, again, I'm not going to go into it. I mean, all I'm saying to you is that New Zealand has had a long-standing position under a bipartisan position under successive governments to recognise Palestine and also self-determination for Palestine. You've seen us do things over my time in government where we've issued travel bans and sanctions on extremist ministers that are undermining the two-state solution. You've seen us do the same with extremist Israeli settlers on the West Bank who are undermining the conditions for a two-state solution to emerge. What you're seeing is very strong statements for us partnering with other like-minded countries around the issues at hand. The issue at hand is humanitarian assistance. We have a country where I think 94% of all the hospitals are essentially damaged or out of operation. You've got a huge amount of displacement of people within Gaza. We don't think Israel should be undertaking any more military action. We need to get to ceasefire. We need to get to diplomacy, dialogue, and we need to have unfettered, unfiltered access of humanitarian assistance into Gaza. It has plumbed at new lows. It is an absolute human catastrophe. On the other hand, we need to see Hamas release hostages. It's as simple as that.
There's a broad range. If there's a broad range of views around the cabinet table, what's your view?
I'm not going to get ahead of our cabinet conversations and process. I know that's very frustrating for everybody, but we are signalling to you that we've had a conversation today. We're signalling to you that we actually will take a formal decision in September, and we're also just acknowledging, as there is in New Zealand society, a range of views around this issue, and there has been for some time.
You won't share your personal view?
No, because I want to participate in those cabinet conversations.
Prime Minister, just on heart.
Sorry, Thomas. Sorry, guys.
What date in September will you make the decision?
Again, it'll be sometime in September. I'm not going. No, we'll work. We've said in the month of September. I'm not sure exact date yet.
Why hasn't Cabinet discussed this earlier?
Well, it's only in recent last 2 weeks that you've actually seen many of our close partners actually move their positions. As you said, Australia, you've seen today it was a decision that that I know it was coming. Because I spoke to Anthony about it yesterday. But I just say also. You've seen, I spoke to President Macron when he moved his position. I spoke to Keir Starmer when he moved his position as well. So it's literally within the last 2 weeks. We actually haven't had an opportunity to physically come together. It's a topic that deserves us to have a good in-person conversation about. But again,
were you aware that Minister Peters was going to put out a statement around this today?
Sorry?
Were you aware that Peters was going to?
Sorry?
Were you aware that Peters was going to put
Yes.
Public today?
Yes.
Prime Minister, just on heart health, there's a new report out that says only a third of the cardiologists that our country needs. A new report shows New Zealand has only a third of the cardiologists it needs, and people are dying because of treatment delays. Is your government going to do anything about this?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's way too many Kiwis waiting way too long for treatments across the whole of our healthcare system. You know, we've inherited a botched structure. Good news in Northland, there's some good news in Waikato around cardiac performance for patients. But again, you know, what we're saying is, and the other thing I'd say to you is, which I don't think I've talked about before, but Health New Zealand have actually, I think, got 22 Zealand. But I just want to acknowledge, yes, this is a global issue. You know, on cardiac specialists, there's a global shortage of cardiac specialists all around the world. Many countries are dealing with this. What are we doing about it? Well, we're spending almost $1 in every $5 of this government's expenditure on healthcare. It's now up to $33 billion. We've hired 600 more doctors. We've hired 2,100 more nurses. We've opened up expansion training places for doctors in training at the existing medical schools, plus opened up the third one. And we've opened up our international settings and expanded those to welcome cardiac specialists and doctors to this country. So I fully acknowledge we've got more to do, and as I've been saying around the workforce issues, we've got, you know, while as good the progress has been on the extra additional nurses and the extra additional doctors, the challenge is it's getting them into the specialist areas, and it's also getting them into rural and provincial New Zealand as well.
Thank you. And
Prime Minister, do you support Hobson's pledge because they support the coalition government?
Sorry, no, I'm not a supporter of Hobson's pledge.
In that case, then will you publicly state that you disagree with the use of that billboard that they took and the photograph of the queer and the billboard that
Sorry,
they
I just
used?
haven't seen what you're referencing, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it looks like President Trump will have a meeting with Putin to sort of
Our position is that, you know, it's encouraging to see the US, you know, engage with Russia and Alaska, as you're saying this week with President Trump and President Putin. Equally, it's been a peace plan, and they need to be. They're a sovereign nation. They were attacked by, you know, it's Russia's illegal war and a moral war. They can stop it tomorrow, immediately, and we can have an immediate ceasefire on land, sea, and air tomorrow. But regardless of the conversations that are happening this week, which are encouraging, the bottom line is Ukraine needs to be determining in those conversations, determining its own side.
Does that mean any?
Well, what we want to see is there are conversations happening in Europe and in North America with the respective parties, but you cannot agree what's going to happen in Ukraine without Ukraine being involved in it. That's a pretty simple thing.
Or you do not agree with any of the ideologies or policies that that Hobson's pledge currently espouse?
Well, I'm a member of the National Party. I support the National Party, and I'm Prime Minister of New Zealand. And as a result, I do anything that advances New Zealand's interests, and that's what.
Yeah, thank you. On AUKUS Pillar 2, you're obviously coming in under Pillar 2 with Japan. What does that mean for New Zealand when Cabinet goes to make a decision on whether New Zealand, you know, will collaborate under AUKUS Pillar 2? Do you do that on, say, like a project-by-project basis? Do you do an in-principle decision? How does that work from here on out for New Zealand, now that we have a bit more detail around
Yeah, I have to be honest, on AUKUS Pillar 2, you know, all of this is quite a premature conversation because essentially it's been a pretty slow burn around, you know, New Zealand's engagement at an official level. I'll share that with you, but there has been really no change over the course of the last 18 months.
So you see that even though Japan has undertaken a joint exercise that has been branded under the AUKUS Pillar 2 umbrella with those other, you know, core AUKUS partners, that now doesn't make any difference to New Zealand, our understanding of it, or
No, we're having our own independent conversations with AUKUS around Pillar 2. To be honest, you know, we haven't, you know, as I said, very similar position to the previous government, continuing to explore it, but no real progress at this point.
Why is Winston Peters taking our decision on Palestine to the UN instead of yourself?
Because I'm practically not at UN Leaders Week this year, and he will be. It's quite common that sometimes it's the leader or the Prime Minister, sometimes it's the Foreign Minister. That's been our long-standing
last year, and it's probably unlikely you'll go next year. Because
I didn't go last year.
Yeah, so why haven't you gone any of
I will go at some future point, but it's just schedule and also priority for me right now.
What's the process around this potential?
We had a good conversation today. Again, we'll make a cabinet decision in September. And we'll communicate that as we go into UN Leaders Week. But again, I'm not wanting to get ahead of the process. I'm not wanting to presuppose an outcome. I'm just saying to you that we've got.
So for the rest of the month, you're taking public feedback, or what actually is the process that you're describing?
We'll have ongoing conversations with Cabinet to get to a position. That's all I'll say.
Does the public have any say? Is it just the talk? Was it just a talk within the Cabinet?
Well, again, we'll take a decision as the Government of New Zealand on behalf of all New Zealanders. That's our responsibility and role. That's what you've seen other countries do over the last 2 weeks as well. And so we'll work our way through those conversations and come to a position.
It's just not clear what the process is, and how, if there is a process, how the decision that you will come to in September could not have been made today. Because if there isn't a process between now and September, then what's the point of waiting a month? Why didn't you just decide today?
Well, I think you've seen other countries take quite a bit of time in the build-up and the lead-up to making their own decision, which they then have announced when they're ready to announce, and we're following exactly the same process, which is that as a Cabinet, we'll have continued conversations on the topic, we'll build up our position, we'll take our decision, and then we'll communicate it.
Is it basically the process is you need to reach consensus at the Cabinet table?
No, we want to make our own informed decision about some of the complex issues that exist around sovereignty and recognition. As I've said, we've had a long-standing position about recognition. We've always said it's when, not if. And it's a question of us actually going back to that, our position, weighing up our position, and we need to be able to do that in a coherent, serious way.
If it's when, not if. Surely the question is just when.
Sorry?
Surely the question is just when. Why do you need to go back and review all of this if the position already is when?
Well, as you've seen, we've had some of our partners have moved to a new position where they have gone for recognition of Palestine. Some of our partners have not. And so for us, we want to make our own independent decision. It's quite okay for us to take our position and test it and to weigh it and to ultimately come up with our own view.
But Prime Minister, the People's Select Committee on Pay Equity began today with calls for the changes to be repealed, and there was wide-ranging criticism of the process. Do you have any regrets regarding the rushing through of those changes under urgency?
No, it was really important we have clarity with one system and one approach rather than two.
Did the government act in bad faith? The Aged Care Association talked about them and other organisations in the sector spending tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars as part of pay equity claims. Some of it was providing data that was requested by the government, while in the background you were working in private on this plan to repeal or to gut the legislation. Yeah,
look, I think we've canvassed this area at the time, when we first talked about it, which is that, we fundamentally feel the system got too broad, too loose, and frankly unworkable and unaffordable.
Well, why not?
And so we made that decision, right? You can argue which way you could go, but as I said, and we've argued at the time, is that we wanted clarity, and we needed to deliver clarity because we didn't think running with two systems was the way forward.
But again, and I know you talked about this previously, why not have engagement, consultation with people, rather than having them spend lots of money at a time when all organisations are facing fiscal, constraints?
Well, it was pretty simple for us. We've been big advocates of pay equity, as you know, in the previous national government. We had a piece of legislation ready to go before the 2017 election. 3 years later, Labor passed a pay equity piece of legislation which we supported, running at about, from memory, $3.5 billion worth of cost. We were all good with that. Chris Hipkins then took in 22, I think it was, 21, 22, a proposal that ended up loosening the criteria, that then blew the thing out to $13 billion. And we had to come in and say, look, we just think that's frankly unaffordable. The criteria is too broad and too loose. We're supportive of pay equity, and all we're doing is returning it back. Your unions, employees are completely well within their rights under the new legislation to progress a pay equity claim. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. We've in fact put money aside in order to deal with exactly that problem. So you know, there's nothing to stop anybody from any of the businesses across. I don't know what you mean. What are you?
Why do you have a little bit of a kiss horny situation?
Yeah.
What happened?
Did we?
Horny situation. What happened?
Did we?
Yeah, he was trying to horny you and you dodged him.
Oh, that's probably just some cool sort of like badly actions that we have when we greet each other. I don't know what that was about, but all in all, very good visit. So that's more what I was focused on.
You said that.
I had to look that up.
You said that
It's a meme.
Is that a meme? Okay. All the big issues.
You said that practically you couldn't make it to the UN in September. Why? How come? What's the?
I just haven't been going to the UN leaders general UNGA this year. That was clear. Basically, it was a decision that was made some time ago.
Why?
Winston will represent us there as he did last year. There'll be an opportunity for me to go. It won't be this year.
Why is that? What's the reason?
Decision was around scheduling at the time, and so we've locked that decision in. So
Are you
that's
doing
what's up.
something else? Or
Sorry?
Are you doing something else?
Yes.
Can I ask you just about
Sorry?
What are you doing?
Well, I'm sorry, but I've been very clear from the beginning in terms of my schedule. I won't be going to UNGA this year. I've got a number of other international travel arrangements. We get a lot of, some of them I do accept, some of I don't. This year when I look at the weight of my travel schedule, it's important I'm here at home as well. It's very important. But I'd love to go to, it's great going around doing lots of global meetings, but the point is I've got to pick the ones that I actually can commit to delivering and doing well.
Prime Minister, what's your...
Are you going to go to Perth instead? That's around the same time in September.
I'll be at Perth and Honiara, yes.
Prime Minister, what's your view on the Ministry of Education not reprinting a book because it has too many Reo Māori words and it could be confusing for learners?
I'm not aware of that issue. I'm very proud of the fact that as we've introduced structured literacy, structured numeracy, that the Minister's actually made a very big effort to make sure that all those resources are available in Te Reo and English. I'm just not aware of what you're talking about.
So you're not concerned of some of the members of the advisory group to the Minister on the curriculum review that some of the ideology, such as Elizabeth Rata, may be seeping through the curriculum changes?
Well, we've got a panel of experts that are determining what New Zealand kids need to learn. I think education, parents left school at 15, 16, and I benefited from a great public education system and did well for myself as a result of that. I want that for every Kiwi kid. And let's be honest, when we have half our kids showing up at high school not at the standard they need to or in Canada, in Ireland, in New South Wales, we're going to do everything we can to make sure we strengthen and get core academic subjects into primary and intermediate, and also in secondary with an NCA replacement. Whether students are Māori or non-Māori, it's the same challenge for everybody, and so we just want to make sure the resources are fully available in both languages.
But your view though, that they haven't reprinted something because they're saying Reo Māori is too confusing for reading, for people who are learning to read. Do you think that having Reo Māori within the curriculum in mainstream schools is confusing for young?
Well, I think having Te Reo is really important. That's why we've made a big effort to make sure that any of our resources, as we've retooled the curriculum around structured literacy, structured numeracy, I'm very proud of the fact we put more money into resources to make them available in Te Reo. But the underlying philosophy of we need to teach structured literacy so that our kids are learning to read one way, same way, every day. Same on mathematics, so they've got the foundations in place to be able to go out there and access higher times right now. But it's a pretty exciting world out there, and there's a lot of high-paying jobs that need to come to New Zealand. And for us to access those jobs and to set our kids and our grandkids up for better lives than what we have, that requires us to actually educate them well, and that's what our focus is about. I'm proud of what we're doing in education.
The Māori Principals Association, Te Akatea, have come out to say that the removal of that one book is not just about one book and 6 words. It's actually an ongoing policy to remove Te Reo from a range of policies and initiatives. But however, they also went on to say that it was racist and white supremacist. What's your response?
Well, I disagree completely. I'm not familiar with what the book you're talking about, but I just say to you, I'm very familiar with the fact that we think we need to teach our kids the basics brilliantly. We're doing that through structured literacy, structured numeracy. We're doing that through an NCA replacement. We're doing that through more learning support, $700 million investment there. You're seeing a huge growth in classrooms to kura and to schools across the country. That's all good.
The point is, though, Prime Minister, is that they're using that as an example of the removal of Te Reo me ona tika in kura.
Disagree completely. disagree completely.
Prime Minister, can I ask you about the offshore and seabed legislation? You
Yep.
said it's about restoring the intent of Parliament at the time.
Yes.
But Chris Luxon, who was Attorney General then, instrumental in passing the law, says that's not the case, that your legislation undermines Parliament's intent. Who's right?
Well, we have a view, which is we're just taking it back to the high test that was in place in 2011, which actually found the balance between Māori with customary rights, which needs to be respected, as well as the rights of all New Zealanders to have access to the coast. And so we think that balance was about right when the legislation was passed. Subsequent court decisions have obviously lowered the thresholds around that, and we saw the Supreme Court decision. We looked at it very closely. We weighed up, and we thought it was still too broad and too loose and open for interpretation, and that's why we've decided to go back to the original plan, which is to legislate for it.
What do you think that the intent of Parliament was at the time?
To get the balance right between customary rights and also the rights of all New Zealanders, and I think it did that at the time.
Minister Finlayson had also gone on to say that the narrative is that Māori will be stopping all New Zealanders from going onto the sea or, participating, having a good time on the beach. And he said that that is an utter and complete lie. Now, it comes off the back of a comment from Minister Goldsmith, who said that, as an example, there are iwi and hapu that can stop marine builds in certain in areas. So the narrative is amongst Te Ao Māori that we are being held out as
No, look, we just want to make sure that we can get the balance right to get recognition of customary rights for Māori, which is really important, and also make sure we protect the rights of all New Zealanders to have access to the coast as well. Court decisions over time have lowered the threshold, and as a result of that balance out of whack. We need to get that back into check.
To know what Parliament's intent was at the time and whether it's been accurately reflected?
I can't talk to that. All I can say to you is our view, which is that actually having looked at the Supreme Court decision, we've determined that actually, doing what we were proposing to do before the Supreme Court made its decision at the end of last year, is to make sure it brings the intention back to what was intended back in 2011.
What is your response though then? What is your response then though to the commentary around that, around making retrospective law as unconstitutional? Costing you $15 million to go back and relook at all those cases. I mean, what is your response to that?
Yeah, look, I mean, I appreciate it, but we've got to be able to get to a place where there is a case that people need to make for customary title. That's, the test and the threshold's pretty clear about that. I appreciate there are people already in the system, and that'll be frustrating because we'll have to go back to that, back into starting the process again.
Prime Minister, was there any discussion about not proceeding with the bill given the court's decision, purely around the degree of controversy the bill has and the fact that the court has ruled in your favour? Was there any discussion about not proceeding with the bill?
We looked at the bill very closely over the first half of this year to sort of understand the rulings that were made, and the decision we made it as maintained.
How will you feel if you have another massive hikoi on your hands as a result of this decision?
Sorry?
How will you feel if you have another massive hikoi on your hands as a result of this decision, which is what some iwi are saying?
Well, I appreciate that, but again, as I said, I'm trying to explain to you the intention of what we're doing as a government, which is to say, look, we're trying to get the balance right. The balance got out of whack because of different court decisions which lowered the thresholds. That wasn't what Parliament intended when it passed the Act, and all we're trying to do is get back to that position again. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great week.